Everyone, welcome to our event. I think we're ready to start our event, and thank you all for being there. Feel free to write down your questions in our chat, or you have a chance to ask your question after presentation by voice. We will answer on them during Q&A part. And today we have a great speaker, Alexander Barmin, who will tell us how to crack interviews. And I think I would like to hand it over to Alexander.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. Let me take over. Let me start sharing my screen. Colleagues, before we start, please confirm if you see my screen. It should be visible. You should see the
I
red
can.
sign cracking technical interview. Yeah, good. Thank you very much for confirming. So I was already introduced. Let me check that my clicker is working because in IT companies everything is not working from the first time. And that's me. I'm a chief software engineer, level 1. I've been to EPAM for more than 6 years, and I've been writing Java for last 13 years. It's quite a lot. I remember times when it was Java 5 and I wrote code in Java 5. Just for your comparison, it's Java 21 right now. Apart from that, being an EPAM engineer and employee, I conducted more than 100 technical interviews for both internal, with both external and internal people. And other than that, I'm head of UK engineering community. Please join our community. We have many interesting events. For example, our next event will be about information security. There, our great speaker will write and exploit. So I definitely invite you to join. Let's start talking about interviews. We don't have much time and we have a lot of things to cover. So I am really happy to see all of you here, and I see that all of you have avatars, which means that you already PAM employees, and in a nutshell, you have already passed via this long interview process. It is long because it includes multiple steps. First of all, obviously, what we need to do, we need to have a pre-screening with a recruiter. Well, this is actually a first call which you have when you decide to join almost any company. You will have a call from someone from the recruitment who will ask, who are you? What are you doing? What do you want to have from your next opportunity? What job are you looking for? And so on. This is important step. And next, in case if you're successful here, what's happening next? Ordinary, we have technical interviews. And a TPAM technical interview is quite formal process. It is well established and it is done intentionally to have the same level of expectation, to same level of experience in all our locations. And our technical interviews are more or less formal and have well-defined structures. Nevertheless, it is not the last final step because for senior positions, for example, starting from B track, in the B track, it's for example, for delivery managers, business analysts, it's for chief engineers. For solution architects, we have a secondary technical interview. It's optional, but still it is here in the pipeline. And what we have at the end, obviously, final interview with your hiring resource manager. Let's go deeper into the details of every step. So what's the intention of every step? So if we're talking about pre-screening with recruiter, actually, it has many reasons. So, for example, during this period, what you're expected to be asked is regarding the position you're going to apply. Because, some websites with job descriptions might be slightly outdated. And for example, the position might be closed at the moment you're trying to apply, but still other positions might be still available. So you will definitely ask if you're happy to apply for other positions as well. Other than that, we all have CVs, I suppose, at least at the moment of application, you may have CV and your cover letter. It's optional, or maybe some references. And nevertheless, you will be even having all these documents, you might be asked about your previous experience, about your skills and salary expectations. And maybe you have some limitations to work. So speaking about this stage, it's important to highlight it's important for you to highlight if you have any limitations. For example, you can work only remotely, or you have some disability, and so that you want your future employer to know about that. Other than that, if you are active employer of any company at the moment, so you also definitely asked to reveal your notice period. In a nutshell, it's an amount of time you need to work at your current employer before moving to the next position. And at the end, recruiter ordinary explains the next steps. So this is the goal of the pre-screening with recruiter, to make sure that on a high level you match the position. Primary technical interview also has an intention, and what is ordinary asked is because we're talking about software engineering position, you're ordinary asked about main knowledge about computer science, your experience in expected technologies. If you, for example, trying to apply it for Java developer, you will be definitely asked about Java. If you decide to join Python direction, you will be asked about Python. And as CPAM policy, it is always strongly recommended to have some practical part of the interview where you ask to write some code. Not something sophisticated, complicated, but still it is what it is. Secondary technical interview is much more complicated and slightly pressuring than the primary technical interview, because it's focused on different things. It's quite often it's focused on system design, non-functional requirements gathering, stakeholders management, and so on. We will talk about it in details, but slightly later. And also, it quite often has a technical practical session with more focus on technical details, knowledge of technologies, and so on. And final interview with resource manager, it's also important because it's mostly soft skill focused, because might be because it's not a secret that it's really hard to grow up leaders, and in case if EPAM can hire a person with some leadership skills, or at least the leadership abilities, maybe for this person a special position might be offered. For example, instead of just being a senior engineer, you as a candidate might be promoted to the lead engineer position if you have enough soft skills and experience dealing with that. And obviously, most important part is that here you discuss your compensation. This is overview of the overall process. Let's dig into the details. And again, I'd like to remind and tell you that you are encouraged to write your comments and questions to the chat. Let's start with technical interview, because pre-screening with recruiter is important, but still it's not about technical things. Let's take a look into what is the ordinary structure of the technical interview. Actually, it starts with the interviewer introduction, some warm-up, and ordinary interviewer is telling you about structure of the interview. Why it is important? Because people are ordinarily stressed when they are asked questions, because some person from the company you want to join will start evaluating you, so that it's better, it's important to do some warm-up. And ordinary, it is at least recommended by EPAM trainings that interviewer introduces himself or herself and tell about structure of the interview. Like, interview will take hour and a half. It will consist of multiple pieces. First of all, we will talk about this, next about that, and coding session at the end. This, in a nutshell, it allows the candidates to understand the structure and timings. And next, it's your part to introduce yourself. And here, while you're introducing yourself, it's important to select the most relevant topics, the most relevant achievements for the position. Because, for example, if you're as a candidate try to apply for the, let's say, senior software engineering position, you need to show that you already perform at senior software engineer position. You already have some background where you solved outstanding technical challenges, and that you're mostly familiar with majority of technologies that might be quite relevant to the position. Ordinary, during this section, the interviewer is asking about the technical challenge you solved recently, or for example, regarding the task you solved and you're really proud of it. It's a really good place. It's a really good time for you to shine, to highlight that the work you've done was really important for the customer. It was really important for the business. It allowed you to beat some competitors to win new market. And for example, it improved performance, security, reliability, everything, anything. And what's important here to say is that it's not the team, not, let's say, it obviously it's a team effort, but in this team effort you played a crucial role. So we're always struggling to tell about our own achievements, to highlight them as much as we can. So if you can, for example, prepare a few sentences in advance, we will show you in better light during this section where you introduce yourself. So here the main advice is to be prepared and tell about your best achievement, which you can next spread and answer many questions regarding it. And what's ordinary happening next? Next, you're ordinary asked some basic computer science questions. It's important because it's for the interviewer, it's necessary to understand that actually you are not, let's say, familiar with one single technology like Java, Python, or something, but also you understand what lays behind the technology. So, for example, you know that there are some strange things in Java like array list, linked list, but why does it matter? These questions matter because they allow the interviewer to understand that actually you know that there are different data structures in Java, or in or in computer science in common. And next, all these data structures can be successfully applied in different conditions. And you, as a candidate, can prove that you actually know in which scenarios it's better to use one data structure or another. For example, quite often here you are asked to estimate, for example, um, I don't know, complexity of getting element by index from a particular data structure. And here you can shine and tell about O notation, about complexity of algorithms. You can highlight that actually you know what it is asked, what the question is about. And that will definitely improve your, let's say, confidence in front of the interviewer. And next, what's happening in Codinary, you will get some programming language specific questions. Why? What's the difference between this and that? So basic questions about computer science are mostly about basic data structures and algorithms that you're familiar with. Let's say sorting algorithms, search algorithms, you're familiar with data structures, you know how to deal with basic concepts. And next, because what we may have is programming language specific questions. Next, you're asked about specification of your language. This is again important because it's fine not to know something when you join at, for example, a junior position. You're intended to grow while you're a junior. It's expected that you may not know something. But for example, in case if you're trying to apply for the senior position, it is expected that basic questions are definitely covered and you know all the basics already. So here Ordinary asked some major things from the language specification: how to create objects, how to deal with different data structures in it, how to, for example, deal with exception handling, what to do with files, what are effective or not effective algorithms of dealing with that. So majority of programming languages have their own specifics. So for example, in Java, it's necessary to keep in mind that resources should be closed after the usage. In Python, it's necessary to know, for example, some string manipulation patterns. In Go, you also should be familiar with different things. And actually here you're asked about that you know syntax of your programming language. Quite often you're not asked about low-level design and details, but sometimes it happens. But main goal here is to make sure that you know the programming language you're going to use. It and what else is that you not only know, for example, but by watching number of YouTube videos, how to answer the question, is you also ask to do some small coding. Uh, it is true that it's hard to quote in front of other people. Yes, that's definitely true. Nevertheless, it's important. And here again, there are some tips which I want to share with you. You will not be asked to write a complicated application while during the technical interview because you just may not have enough time. And what's important here is that you need to show your way of thinking. Like, okay, I need to convert a collection of numbers to strings or vice versa, for example. And here you can tell, okay, what I see is that this is a collection, this is what is expected to do. I have multiple alternatives on how to implement that. By doing this, you show to the interviewer that you have quite good background in doing the job, in doing that. You also consider some corner cases, additional scenarios. You also know what caveats you may face. It's a about data conversion is just a artificial example. Nevertheless, it's quite ordinary. You're asked to do some algorithmic coding. For example, you need to find an element in the tree or add element to the list or reverse a linked list. And here again, the most important thing is not how successfully maybe you solve the challenge. It's okay to solve it successfully, and it is also okay not to solve it as well because of different reasons, like you have not had enough time. But nevertheless, you show that actually you can type the code on your own. Uh, but also what's important is that you show your way of thinking. Uh, and what's next? Also, quite ordinary at the end, there are some basic soft skill questions. So for example, do you familiar with some development methodologies? Like, are you familiar with Agile? Are you familiar with Scrum? Do you familiar with some tools? What will you do? What would you do in case if you're falling behind the schedule and you're, for example, getting a call out of your working hours to fix production environment and so on? So it's not a question to understand how deeply you know Jira, Agile framework, and all the principles of Agile. It's again, it's a basic check that you know everything you will use during your day-to-day work. And other than that, we have a lot of candidates around the world, and not for all of them English is their first language. So in majority of scenarios, some technical interviews that are conducted in their first language, but also English is checked. So please be ready and know that. And actually, good technical interviewer at the end do some wrap up of the session and tell the candidate regarding next steps. Ordinarily, it sounds like it was really pleasant talking to you and so on. But at the end, important bit for you is that next steps are I will provide feedback within 3 working days, and next you will be contacted by a talent acquisition manager or some person from talent acquisition. And if not, please reach out to me. This is important because it gives you, as a candidate, some visibility. And what you can do here, you can, for example, ask, for example, regarding the process, you may ask regarding the position, you may ask regarding further steps. Quite often, it's a PAM specific that interviewer may not know specific of the project you might be involved in. It's because um, we have a global technical interview service, and global technical interview service means that people from location A are hiring people from location B are doing technical interviews. So that please be ready that you might not get an answer. Okay, I'm reached the end of the slide, and there is a comment in the chat. Let me read it loudly. You talked about being nervous, and first of all, I want to say thank you very much for posting your comments. You talked about being nervous. I'm always nervous, even then I'm well prepared or I have nothing to lose. Just a mock interview. I do know a lot more in my technical field than I can reliably explain in the interview most of the time. This is highly logical, but still happen. Yes, I am. I can't agree more. I'm here with you. What I can do is to practice, have more interviews, nothing else. And that's actually true. But what else you can do? You can start conducting technical interviews as an interviewer. It also significantly increases your confidence because you know what to expect, and you, roughly speaking, know proper and correct answers. Because there is a trick. When you know the answer, you can start answering the question in, roughly speaking, in the right way. So, for example, if you're asked about some concept, like, I don't know, tell me about what data structure lays behind tree map in Java. You tell, okay, it's a black red tree, and that's it. You know the internals, you know the right answer. You tell exactly one exact phrase which shows that you know, and for the interview there is no need to ask more questions. So unfortunately, yes, it's practice. And let me continue reading it. And of course, be very vocal about my way of thinking while doing the challenge, as you mentioned. How would you approach getting rid of these exam fever-like symptoms? I don't know. I think it's just practice on the one hand, and on the other hand, you try to conduct some technical interviews, try to do some mock interviews, nothing else. Also, other than that, you can, for example, start interviewing your colleagues or ask them to help you with preparation. It also works because our most worry is happening because we do not know what to expect. And in majority of cases, collection of questions is quite similar everywhere. Because if you're, for example, applying for the Java position, you will be asked about Java, you will not be asked about Python because it's irrelevant. And again, there are not so many things regarding Java what you can talk about. Okay, let's move forward. Interviewer's introduction. Okay, so let's get back to the details and talk a little about some things here. Going deeper to the details, I think I covered most of them, but what's actually happening while interviewer is introducing himself or herself? It's important for the interviewer, in case if you are interviewer, to highlight your experience in the industry. It's important for the candidate to understand that it's not just a random John is asking you for random questions. It is an expert in the industry and the programming language who understands your questions and answers. And again, structure of the interview, icebreaking and warm-ups. And this bit regarding icebreaking and warm-ups, it is something which will definitely allow you to avoid this exam fever like symptom, because definitely the interview may go in a very, very formal way when you're asked by checking the checklist. Okay, do you know what is object? Yes. Okay, tick box. Do you know what is object-oriented programming? Yes. Okay, tick box. This warm-up definitely help you to feel more comfortable, and that's useful. Okay, candidate introduction. As I already told, what you need to show is the previous experience, which is relevant to the position. It's good to prepare outstanding challenge that you solved and some technologies that you used which are relevant to the position. Because quite often we deal with technologies which are varies from company to company. One company can use, for example, on-premise services. Other company can use cloud services. And if you have experience dealing with both, you can highlight that. Apart from running my services in Redshift, I also know how to run services in AWS, and this will be a great advantage for you as a candidate. Basic computer science questions. What is ordinary asked? Ordinary, you're asked about some basic things like object-oriented programming, because most of scenarios we write code in object-oriented programming languages. Some basic data structures, as I explained, it's important to know how they work under the hood because they may get some important performance and efficiency benefits. Performance is a quite interesting topic, and I've been to the talk from one of the JDK engineers, and he told that, well, majority of our performance problems can be solved just by using proper data structure. We don't, in majority of scenarios, we don't have to think about complicated concurrency. We just need to select the proper data structure. It is exactly about that. In basic algorithms, search and search, sort, in data indexation, and so on, and basic design patterns. This is what is ordinarily asked here. Patterns from Django 4, questions regarding solid, keep it simple, stupid, and DIY. Yes, you've been asked about solid every time, every single time. And I admit that actually this is one of the most important questions, because if you really understand how to apply solid, you will succeed. Because ordinarily during the technical interviews, you're asked, do you know what is solid? Yes, I do. Okay, what else? It means nothing. But if you're asked how to implement, for example, open close principle in your application, which means that it seems in future you, or at least you have experience building systems with long lifeline, which would be good in maintenance and at work and technical extension. So on the one hand, I also see the comment that solid is overrated. That might be true, but on the other hand, for example, my personal experience showed that projects which followed solid principles are much easier to maintain in long term. Yes, it might be hard to write code following all the solid rules in the short term. It's hard, yes, it's true, but in long term, it pays you back. Okay, almost half of the session. Let's move forward. What do you ordinarily ask during programming language specific section? Standard library ordinary collections, input output, synchronization primitive, exception handling, and language specification, and some runtime details. It's ordinarily not a very deep question regarding memory management, garbage collection, implementation of concurrency, because here it's important to know that you know how it works on a high level, because we have a low-level technical interview, which is second one. It is quite often focused exactly on that. Commonly used libraries. If you, for example, apply for the position where you need to use Spring, you will be definitely asked about Spring. Most of the applications are dealing with databases, so that's databases, message brokers, and other tools. Quite often it is just a common understanding and some high-level understanding of SQL, for example. Coding challenges, main goals. As I said, check the candidate is hands-on and check that the candidate has problem-solving mindset and way of thinking. So during the coding part, please don't be quiet and have some fun, because sometimes it's really fun to see how candidates are struggling. Tips and tricks will be in a moment, but right now, basic soft skills, self-management techniques, awareness on modern methodologies, and some case-based questions. What would you do to resolve a conflict? Answer code review arguments, and how would you distribute tickets in the middle of sprint, and so on. That's it. We already discussed it. Nevertheless, there are some red flags during the primary technical interview. Cheating, Googling, using ChatGPT for solving the coding challenge. Unfortunately, it's very visible, and I can easily demonstrate you how easy it is how to notice it easily. That's it. So every time you switch to Google, Google reveals you, just because it has a very wide page and it immediately noticeable on camera that the lighting of your face has changed. And actually, Googling is not something really good. Or, for example, the candidate might start looking at different places. I even been to the technical interview where two people helped the candidate. For example, the candidate seated in front of me answered the questions on camera, obviously, and sometimes the candidate looked somewhere outside of the screen, and it seems that some people helping him. At the end, we just noticed. At the end, we just noticed that there is some rumor happening in the background. Yeah, so please be aware that it is noticeable. Another important red flag is blaming of your previous employer. Even if you were not comfortable working in your previous company, please do your best in order not to express it, in in a polite way. So you may highlight that, well, my previous company was fine. Nevertheless, I found that I can do better. That's why I decided to change my position, apply for the next job, and so on. Uh, Arguments with the interviewer. It's also an interesting because if you're very familiar with the topic and you're 125% sure that you're right, uh, sometimes it's better to agree just in order to create a proper impression to the interviewer because people don't interview is not a very good place for arguments, so please be ready to agree even if you not agree inside. Tips and tricks. Prepare a short story about yourself. I suppose we already discussed that. And prepare answering a basic question using expected words. As I said, if you're asked about some data structures, please make sure that you immediately talk about complexity. If you're asked about, for example, some Java things, you're talking about Java things in using Java terms. If you're asked about Python, you again talking about Python using Python words, because same concepts in different programming languages might be called differently. Like in Java, we have nothing like list comprehension, but in case if you know what's list comprehension and use it in during the Python interview, you will get additional 5 points. Moving forward, don't hesitate to something you don't know. This is quite interesting. I think it's quite useful during the coding part. If you don't know something, please don't hesitate to say, well, I don't know how to answer your question, but I suppose that it would work like this. So for example, if you don't know how a particular data structure implemented in Java works under the hood, you would say that, well, I don't know how hash map works, but hash part of the name says that it seems something like a hash table is inside, and hash table is working this way. It's also acceptable because it shows that actually you don't know everything. Nevertheless, you know how to find the answer. Moving forward, secondly, technical interview. It is not happening quite often, but it is still happening, and it is optional, and quite often it depends on the results of the first interview. For example, I am as chief software engineer. I also a part of the advanced software engineering track. It's B track. People after, for example, D4 position after lead position can apply for the assessment and move to the B track. Nevertheless, we also hire candidates from the market who may go to the advanced engineering positions. And for them, the interview process is quite long. So they need to successfully pass the first technical interview, and the first interviewer should highlight that it seems that the candidate has very deep technical knowledge, and we may consider this candidate as, for example, as an advanced software engineer. So that second part of the interview will be conducted, or second technical interview. Or, for example, if you apply for the solution architect position, again, you will have a quite similar approach. You will have a short or relatively short first technical interview, and next there will be a technical interview with the actual solution architect. Again, it depends on track, and other than that, it may require some preliminary work. So what does it mean? You may be asked to do some homework. For example, for solution architects, they're ordinarily asked to prepare some documents or to propose some design that next can be discussed during the session. On the one hand, for the candidate, it's quite convenient because they can think about this task in their spare time while they have peaceful time. On the other hand, it's additional effort for the candidate and might not be convenient for everyone. So it depends on the track. And this secondary technical interview is relatively long, and quite often it consists of multiple parts. So design interview. Uh, well, here at EPAM, we again a global company. We geographically distributed, and we cannot conduct sessions. Not always can able to conduct sessions in the office and do whiteboarding on the whiteboard. When people stay together, stand up together and draw something on the whiteboard. Nevertheless, please be prepared if you're applying for the position like this to do some design drawings, for example, using tools like Draw.io, Miro, or something, where you can put boxes and arrows in order to express your design, your proposed design. What's important here is to consider non-functional requirements. You know, we have functional requirements, non-functional requirements, and there are many non-functional requirements, and they mostly drive the design of the solution. So here, what is checked is that you're able to identify non-functional requirements, define which of them are architecture significant, and base design based on them. You can apply any, in a nutshell, you can propose any design you want by saying, I will use microservices, serverless, I will use a big monolithic application, until you can explain and reason why. Because the main outcome of this part is that you're able to compare alternatives, saying, well, we have microservices and monolithics, but for this exact scenario, microservices are overkill just because of ABC. It shows that you have experience dealing with that, you know their pros and cons, and you can reason about that. And obviously, next step, next goal of this stage is to check that you actually have experience in the design itself. You know that you cannot connect your microservices directly to the customer. It's better to have something like an API gateway in the middle. So and other than that, you're aware of current trends in architecture and design. Because in case if you're asked to build a solution like Twitter and you will propose using the hardware and store it on your under your desk, it will be a bit strange because there are clouds are available at the moment. And if you're, for example, familiar with that and you show that you're familiar with that, it's much better. This is the first part of the second technical interview. I would say that, for example, for ICE, we have three pieces of this technical interview. It consists of three parts. It's design, it's coding, and deep, very, very deep digging into the candidate brain by asking super specific technical questions. For solution architects, it's quite similar. Solution architects are asked to do some design. And next, they're mostly driven into the technical questions, drilled with technical questions, and next asked about stakeholders management. For advanced engineers, what we do next, we do advanced coding part. So what are the most hot topics which are asked during the coding section? Obviously concurrency, because everyone is talking about it, everyone does do concurrency, no one uses it in production. Almost no one uses it in production, but it's a hot topic during technical interviews. Obviously, again, just being cautious of time, you will not be asked to implement a work stealing thread pool. You will be asked to implement something simple like blocking queue, or for example, consumer producer design pattern, or something similar. So it is just a hot topic. So it's almost all the time asked, but still it requires some prior preparation. You at least need to be familiar with these design patterns. And obviously, in case if you are at second technical interview for the quite high position, you more likely already familiar with that. So this is what is ordinarily asked. You're asked to implement, or at least asked to reason about producer, consumer, fork, join, work, and some other design patterns which are not so oftenly used. And other than that, you will be asked about some advanced knowledge of the platform. So for Java, it's Java runtime environment. For Python, it's Python runtime environment. For other languages, it might be something different. And what you're ordinarily asked here is difference between available, for example, garbage collectors, because again, it is something which we don't ordinarily do, but everyone is really interested in it. Because actually it this question reveals that you're actually following the trends. You know what's important For example, in production at the moment, you know why all these technologies appear and what are advantages and disadvantages of all of them. So again, it is the same question about comparing alternatives, but alternatives not in design, but for example, in the platform. Memory allocation, object layout, object headers. This is again another interesting topic which is asked almost every time because it is similar. Can be applied to almost any programming language, and every programming language and its runtime implements it differently. So that if you know specifics of that, that's really good. If you don't, just it's good to learn it. Just because in case if you're in production, you're asked why my application works so slow, you can explain, oh, it's because it requires a lot of memory. But next you're asked why does it require a lot of memory, you can reason because it does ABC. This is why it requires a lot of memory. And other than that, some modern programming language are developed rapidly, and there are some internal projects quite often. There are some internal projects which drive the language and move the language forward. For example, if we're talking about Java, and I'm mostly talking about Java because I'm Java developers, for example, Loom, Project Lilliput, Project Valhalla, and so on. If you are familiar with that, if you know how these projects are driving and moving the language forward, this is a good time for you to shine here. Tips and tricks. Uh, this part actually is intended to check your engineering maturity, that you not only know how to implement a REST endpoint or Kafka listeners in your application, but you know why you need to do that. So this the main goal of the interview is to show that you don't not only know what to do, but why you have to do that, what alternatives exist, and what to do with them when you have to choose one or another. And second part is to check that you're keeping eye on the changes in the area you're focused on. So that this interview requires some preparation. You cannot just come from nowhere and say I'm Java expert or I'm Python expert. You need to show that, well, I consider myself as a Java expert because I'm keeping eye on everything that is happening in Java. I'm always familiar with new things which are introduced in this programming language and so on. So unfortunately, you cannot pass it without upfront preparation. And what's my recommendation is to read at least one book about system design. For example, that book with a pig on the cover. It's a very good book, by the way. Moving forward, 15 minutes left. I hope I will do my best to meet this deadline. Final RM interview. Mostly it is required to make sure that you fit the culture of the company, you fit the culture, you fit the team. And what's important here is to show that you're actually a nice guy. So you can say that I know Java or Python or something more better than anyone else, but it's a very good sentence for your technical interview. And here you should say something like, I'm really good at Java, Python, Go, anything, and I can teach other people to be as good as I in it. It's much more valuable here because you're all showing the expression, the intention to grow other people's and not only contribute as an individual contributor. So that's the important thing here. As I mentioned, you might be asked regarding basic engineering practices, Agile, Kanban, Scrum, and other things. Just because modern teams are working this way, modern teams use these technologies, and you don't need to know all the Agile. Uh, Agile, I forget all the items from the Agile manifesto, but you at least need to understand main values. Like Agile, it's about delivering the value. Kanban, it's not about tickets, it's a culture. Scrum, it's about ABC and so on. So it's important for your research manager to understand that, well, this person will not require significant onboarding. This person is already familiar with most of the things. And obviously, you're familiar with basic tools like Jira, Confluence, Jenkins, and so on, like GitHub. And again, no one has spoon-fed you, and you can join the team almost immediately and start performing. And other than that, what's important to discuss here is regarding your career perspectives and growth trajectory. I suppose nobody likes this question like, how do you see yourself in 5 years? Because who cares what can happen in 5 years? I don't know what I will do in 5 years. But actually, the reason behind this question is, what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? Like, in 5 years, I want to be the well, to be honest, I don't know what I want to do in 5 years, but let me imagine that in 5 years, I don't really want to be CTO of a company. I want to drive some interesting initiative inside the company. This is a good career perspective. Or, for example, I apply as a senior engineer, and in 5 years, I want to, let's say, lead a unit of people and become a solution architect. And based on that, your resource manager can make some proposals for you, saying that, okay, you seems to be a prospective candidate, and we have a team, and if you or for example regular engineers, and you as a senior engineer may lead them, and time after time you will pass an assessment and you will become a lead engineer. So this is just a discussion regarding your career perspectives. So please don't be afraid of answering these questions, because again, even if you're asked how do you see yourself in 5 years, actually you're asked what you want to do next. And mostly it's about how you see your place in this company. How do you see yourself in this company? Just because, and next thing, which is also ordinarily asked during the RM interview, it's your ability to organize work of others. If you have such experience, again, you might be hired for the higher position. And obviously, next thing to discuss during this part is compensation and benefits, because you may get your salary, but also you might be involved in some stock purchase scheme. You may get some RSUs and so on. So it's better to clarify it in advance. And in short summary, actually, interview is a bi-directional process. It is important to remember that, because it is not only you are evaluated, you also evaluate the company. So, for example, if you see that even during the technical interview or first pre-screen interview, or you're doing interview with resource manager, the interview were not, let's say, very polite, that they were not really interested in you, it might be a case when they might not be interested in your work and your participation even further. So that if you don't like something, it's again a sign that you need to reconsider your decision. And technical interviews, it's not is not an exam. I'm sorry. It's not an exam, and there is no way to check you against the checklist. There is no reason to do that. It's the main goal here is to check that you know a lot of things to perform successfully, but other than that, you know what to do next, how to what to do next, how to find the proper answer, and that you will not be stuck. You will not stuck. And other than that, it's necessary to remember that technical interviews require some preparation. You cannot just crack it in without preparation. And I think this is a series of events which will prepare you for that. And please don't hesitate to that you don't know something. Nobody knows everything. Thank you. It took 55 minutes on time. Thank you. So any questions, colleagues?
Yeah, as I can see, we don't have any question from the chat, but you have a good opportunity to ask your question by voice. Do we have any question? No. Okay. Last chance to ask your question. I wait 5 seconds.
Like I ordinarily do during this long silence moments, like no questions once, no questions twice, no questions 3 times. What is as in solid? Our single responsibility. Come on. Uh, I did once have a trick question about how would you solve this in Java, and the answer was it can't be done. I think they expect me to tell them that I don't know. Well, that's an interesting question because I think the answer might be, well, you can write it in Java, but maybe Java is not the most efficient runtime for implementing that, because we have a lot of scenarios when Java is not a good, let's say, programming language, like low latency trading, for example. It's not so good. Nevertheless, what you can say, well, Java in the JVM mode is not a good programming language for that. Nevertheless, and here you start to shine, that we have a GraalVM native compiler which makes our Java as performant as I don't know, native executable. And again, you showed yourself from the most beneficial side. Or you might be asked, can you implement, for example, a mobile application for iOS in Java? And you started to think, come on, you're insane asking such kind of question. But next you can answer, yeah, actually, Java is not a good programming language for that. Nevertheless, we have alternatives. I can build a progressive web application in Java with backend in Java, which will gracefully work on mobile. So it's a question about, well, it's not possible, but yes, but. So hope I answered at least and suggested at least a couple of questions which have no good answer, but still, if you know some alternatives, you can reason about that. You can come up with something.
Yeah, thanks for your answer. And I think it was the last question because we don't have a lot of time. Thank you for your presentation. Yeah, I think it was very useful, as for me, really. Yeah, and thank you, dear colleagues, for joining, for your time. And please recognize our speaker by providing Alexander with a special badge. Yes, see you the next event and have a good evening.
Have a good evening. Have a fantastic weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend. Bye.